Today on Psycast, we're going to reflect on something ancient yet deeply relevant. How to get ahead, not by being louder, faster, or more aggressive, but by going quieter, deeper, and more intentional. Have you ever looked around and felt like everyone is running a race you never signed up for? Like the world is obsessed with being seen, with being busy, with making noise, and yet something inside you quietly asks, is this really the way? If you've ever felt that pull between staying grounded and trying to keep up, you're not alone. We're taught, almost from birth, that to win in life, you have to compete loudly. You have to prove yourself, market yourself, assert your value again and again. And maybe you've tried. Maybe you've posted more, spoken louder, worked longer hours just to feel like you're not falling behind. But here's the quiet truth. The real way forward often looks nothing like that. And maybe no one told you this before, but silence can be your greatest advantage. In a world addicted to reaction, the one who chooses to respond with intention holds the real power. Marcus Aurelius, the Stoic emperor-philosopher, wrote about this in his Meditations nearly 2,000 years ago. He said, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." What he meant was, when the world is chaotic, the one who remains anchored doesn't just survive, it leads. The Stoics weren't interested in performance. They were interested in mastery of the self. Because when you master your inner world, the outer world starts to lose its grip on you. You stop being pulled in every direction. You stop measuring your worth by how many people are watching. And suddenly, you're free. Not because you escaped the world, but because you stopped being owned by it. Think about the people who seem deeply powerful. Not the loud ones, but the calm ones. The ones who speak softly, but carry a kind of presence that makes people lean in. They don't need to dominate the room. They've already mastered the one thing most people haven't, their own mind. That's the way of Marcus Aurelius. That's the real edge. It's not about getting ahead by stepping over others. It's about stepping out of the race entirely and realizing that the competition was never the point. Most people are busy reacting, scrolling, comparing, trying to be heard. But when you become the one who listens more than you speak, who observes more than you post, who waits before reacting, you're no longer playing the same game. And that's how you quietly move ahead. Without making noise, without seeking validation, just by being deeply rooted in yourself. Let me tell you something I once heard. Still waters run deep. It's easy to overlook the power of quiet people because we've been conditioned to equate volume with value. But there's a certain kind of depth that only shows itself in silence. And once you've tasted that stillness, the noise starts to feel cheap. You realize that most of what people are chasing is just distraction dressed up as ambition. And the real work, the work of building a meaningful life, requires a different kind of energy, one that doesn't burn you out, but builds you up from the inside. But maybe you're wondering, if silence is so powerful, why do so few people choose it? Why does it feel so rare to meet someone who carries that quiet strength? Because stillness is uncomfortable at first. It confronts you. In silence, you meet the thoughts you've been avoiding. You face the ache of not being enough, not being seen, not being in control. That's why most people avoid it. They'd rather stay busy than be alone with themselves. They'd rather perform confidence than actually feel it. Marcus Aurelius didn't have Instagram or endless notifications. But even in ancient Rome, he noticed how easily the human mind can be scattered, pulled in all directions. He wrote, "Nowhere you can go is more peaceful, more free of interruptions than your own soul." But he added something important. If you can find that peace. And that's the real challenge. Most people don't know how. They're constantly moving, but rarely arriving, talking, but not really connecting, consuming, but not digesting. So when someone walks through the world with presence, with stillness, they seem unusual, almost otherworldly. And that's the irony. In trying so hard to be impressive, we lose the very thing that makes us magnetic, being at peace with who we are. Stillness doesn't mean doing nothing. It means doing the inner work, quietly, patiently, and consistently, while the world rushes by. It's knowing your values, acting with integrity, and not needing applause to stay committed. That's rare. And that's why it's powerful. There's a moment in every life where you realize you can either chase every wave or you can learn to sit at the shore, watch the tide, and move with wisdom. That's not laziness. That's clarity. It's not about giving up ambition. It's about aiming it inward first, so that when you move from a place of truth, not panic. Seneca, another Stoic, said, "If a man knows not to which port he sails, no wind is favorable." And maybe that's why so many people feel burned out. They're sailing fast, but in circles. They're trying to get ahead without knowing where ahead even is. They've been taught to climb every ladder, but no one ever asked, does this ladder lead somewhere worth going? The people who get ahead without noise are the ones who know what they're not chasing. They've untangled their worth from their productivity. They've stopped needing to prove their value through constant motion. And that's why they move differently. They don't rush to respond. They don't panic in uncertainty. They've built an inner compass, and they trust it more than the noise around them. This kind of quiet confidence is not given. It's built through small, repeated choices to pause before reacting, to listen before speaking, to reflect before moving. These choices may not seem dramatic, but over time, they shape the soul. And while most people are seeking shortcuts, those who choose this path are laying a foundation that actually lasts. Let me ask you something most people never stop to consider. What if your greatest strength isn't your ability to impress others, but your ability to remain unchanged by their noise? It's a radical thought in a world built on performance, but Marcus Aurelius lived by this. He believed that the true test of character wasn't how you behaved when admired, but how you behaved when ignored, when misunderstood, when tested by circumstances beyond your control. In his meditations, he wrote, "Be like the cliff against which the waves continually break, but it stands firm and tames the fury of the water around it." That image stayed with me. A cliff doesn't argue with the sea. It doesn't defend itself. It simply is, unshaken, still, grounded in what cannot be moved. But we, as human beings, are rarely taught how to be that grounded. We're trained to be waves instead. Fast, reactive, eager to move, afraid to miss out. We confuse movement with growth. We confuse attention with connection. And we confuse urgency with importance. But some of the most important things in life grow slowly, quietly, away from the spotlight. Emotional resilience, for example, is not built in public. It's built in the invisible moments. When you choose not to reply to the message that triggered you. When you feel the impulse to prove someone wrong, and instead, you breathe. When you feel lonely, and you stay present instead of reaching for distraction. These tiny, inner choices, often unseen, are what separate those who live with depth from those who live on the surface. The Stoics understood this. They weren't trying to escape emotion, but to master their response to it. They knew that no matter how much you achieve on the outside, if you don't have peace within, it will never feel like enough. Marcus Aurelius ruled one of the most powerful empires in history, but his writings are filled with reflections on death, humility, and the temporary nature of all things. Because he knew, real power is not in conquering others. It's in conquering the part of yourself that seeks to be more than what you are. There's something deeply liberating about that. When you stop performing, you can finally begin to live. Not for applause, not for validation, but for alignment, for congruence between what you say and what you do, for integrity that no one needs to see for it to matter. And in a world that's constantly trying to pull you into its chaos, that kind of inner stillness becomes your quiet revolution. Because here's the thing, most people don't need more motivation. They need clarity. They need to be reminded that it's okay to slow down, that it's not weak to be quiet, that it's not failure to take a different path. And when you begin to live like that, something unexpected happens. You start attracting peace instead of chasing it. You stop needing to explain yourself. You stop trying to be understood by everyone. And in that space, you begin to understand yourself. But there's a cost to this kind of clarity. And maybe that's why so few people choose it. Because when you start living with stillness, when you stop chasing what everyone else is chasing, you'll notice something. You won't fit in the same way. You won't be as easily understood. You'll say less at dinners. You'll stay quiet in meetings. You'll no longer feel the urge to jump into every conversation, to prove you know, to prove you belong. And for a while, that can feel like loss, like something is being taken from you. But let me tell you something I've come to believe. Most of what we think we're losing is just noise we mistook for meaning. There's a silence that hurts and a silence that heals. The first is the silence of disconnection, when we feel invisible, unwanted, forgotten. But the second is the silence of presence, the kind that doesn't need to speak because it's already enough. That's the silence Marcus Aurelius lived in, a silence not of emptiness, but of fullness, a quiet not of fear, but of strength. We live in a world where almost everything is designed to pull us outward, toward opinions, comparisons, arguments, distractions. But you cannot build a rooted life out there. You can only build it by turning inward, by facing the discomfort of your own company, by asking yourself questions no one else can answer for you. Who am I when no one's watching? What do I stand for when no one agrees? What kind of peace can I carry? Not when everything is going well, but when everything is uncertain. Most people never stop long enough to ask. They're too busy becoming versions of themselves that other people can accept. But acceptance built on performance is always fragile. One wrong move, one missed step, and the applause fades. That's why stillness is so rare. Because it requires you to be honest, to stop pretending, to face your fears without numbing them. But when you do, when you really sit with yourself, without trying to fix or escape or distract, you begin to change. Not in loud, dramatic ways, but quietly, subtly, like roots growing beneath the surface. No one sees it at first, but over time it shows in how you speak, how you listen, how you carry yourself. Marcus wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." He believed that obstacles are not the enemy, they're the path. And sometimes the greatest obstacle isn't outside us, but within. The need to be liked, the fear of not being enough, the hunger for approval that keeps us performing instead of living. But once you see that clearly, you can begin to live differently. You stop trying to fix how people see you. You start focusing on how truly you're living. And that shift, subtle as it seems, is everything. Because when you no longer need the world to understand you, you are finally free to understand yourself. There's a kind of success that doesn't come with applause, a kind of progress that no one else can measure, but you feel it, quietly, deeply, unmistakably, when you're alone with yourself. It's the success of no longer being controlled by your triggers, the quiet pride in choosing calm over chaos, the inner nod you give yourself when you could have lashed out, but didn't, when you could have chased, but instead you stayed. These aren't things the world will celebrate. There are no trophies for emotional maturity, no headlines for a healed nervous system, but that's exactly what makes it so powerful. Marcus Aurelius lived in a palace, commanded armies, held power most of us can't imagine. And still, his deepest writings weren't about dominance or legacy. They were about discipline of thought, quiet strength, and choosing the harder path of self-mastery over the easier one of ego. He knew that everything external fades. Praise, status, reputation, all of it dissolves in time. But who you become through your inner work, that's yours to keep. That's the one kind of success that doesn't erode. And maybe no one told you this before, but you're allowed to live a life that makes sense to your soul, even if it doesn't impress anyone else. You're allowed to move slower, speak softer, feel deeper. You're allowed to grow roots while everyone else grows wings. Because when the winds of life come, and they always do, it's not the loudest who remains standing. It's the most grounded. In a world that rewards reaction, stillness becomes a quiet rebellion. And every time you choose it, you're practicing something the Stoics would call virtue. Not as moral superiority, but as alignment between your values and your behavior. It's not glamorous. It doesn't always feel good in the moment, but it builds something inside you that no external success can give. You begin to walk through life with a different kind of confidence. Not the kind that needs to be seen, but the kind that doesn't shake when it isn't. You'll still feel fear, doubt, longing, but you'll meet them with clarity. You'll start to realize that true power isn't about being untouchable. It's about being deeply human and still choosing grace, choosing restraint, choosing to hold your center when everything tempts you to leave it. This is the quiet path, the invisible work, the slow build of a strong soul, and it may not get you ahead in the way the world defines success, but it will give you something far more valuable: peace, self-respect, the ability to sleep at night, knowing you didn't betray yourself to gain approval. And in the end, that's what Marcus Aurelius was trying to teach. Not how to win at life, but how to live it well. How to keep your dignity in a world that constantly tries to strip it away. How to remain whole in a world that benefits from your fracture. How to lead, not by force, but by example. Quietly, patiently, from the inside out.